mathematics to organize all those design. And you can't do it as an artist without any knowledges of mathematics. And other part of definition of Islamic art is usually what we call, in an old context, concept of arabesque. But maybe I will focus on these objects to explain it to you. I like it a lot. It's a piece of wood coming from Samarra. It was made in Egypt, but it was found in Samarra. Samarra is near Baghdad. It was the royal palace of the Abbasids during the 9th century and beginning of 10th century. And what is very nice is that the main purpose of the artist who decorated this panel was to find a way to organize this non-figurative decoration of those lines here, everywhere. But what is interesting is that even if he wanted to find a very nice way to design the lines in all the panel, he wanted, in a second idea, to show a bird and here on a flower. And it's not really realistic art. It's in the beginning non-figurative art becoming figurative art, but figurative art that remains a little, I should say, abstract. For instance, you have the foot of the bird, which are also the top of the flower. So it's not really what we can call realistic art, but it's very typical of this new type of art that we see in the beginning. We are here in the beginning of Islam, and what is interesting here, we always have to go back to the historical context. 9th century, 10th century in Middle East, it's also the heritage, the cultural heritage of late antiquities. And late antiquities art, from Roman art, from Byzantine art, is a very realistic figurative art. So when you see this done by an artist in the beginning of Islam, you understand that there is not only a continuity of artistical life, but a real rupture with new rules. So, of course, Islamic art is also religious art, and we don't have to forget it. Religious art means art done for religious people or religious monuments, and I will not develop, but I wanted to show you some masterpieces of this Islamic art in religious contexts. You have lamp mosques, and this is an Egyptian lamp mosque coming from one of the very big mosques in Cairo, the mosque of the Sultan Ibn Kalamun, that you can still visit today. In another cultural context, you have, of course, tombstone, and I saw also some tombstone here, old tombstone for Muslim people. And this is also something very characteristic of religious Islamic art in a Shiite context. Other type of very interesting religious art is whose decoration in lusterware with inscriptions. So it's a context of mausoleum, which is a very it's very characteristic monuments, religious monuments in the Iranian and Shiite world, as you know, and whose decorations in such type of mausoleums are also interesting to see. It's not the idea that it's religious Islamic art is not the techniques or the colors, but it's the way to use calligraphy, the type of surat that you can find, or the type of poetry also that you can find in those religious monuments. And of course, we also have some religious, we can say religious images. It is very in fashion during the 16th century, not in the beginning of Islam, not also during the Middle Age, but during the modern time, if we can say modern for 16th century. We have all tradition in Ottoman Empire, but we can find it also in Iran, in which we want to know better the time of the Prophet, and so we try to develop some literature about the history of the Prophet, and you have here two examples of those stories. And to finish on this first point, very interesting also to discover the representation of Mecca. It's a unique example, not this piece, we find many of them, but this type of representation of Mecca, like an architectural plan, it's one tile. You see, it's big for me because it's more than 60 centimeters high, and it's included in Ottoman style in all the monuments, usually mosques, because of course it's in relation with the Hajj. But you can also find it in some palaces. And to finish on this idea of religious Islamic art, we don't have to forget that Islamic culture or Islamic world is a multicultural civilization. Of course, Islam is the official religion, but you have, it's also, of course, the case today, but it's right from the beginning of Islam until today. You always have a lot of communities, and of course, in the Middle East, you have Christian communities, and this candlestick, which is typical in the same technique as the objects you see before in metal, what we call inlaid metal work, the basin I showed you with the life of the Sultan. So it's the same culture, but the images are Christian images of the Bible. So, quickly, because I will leave you time, I will give you time for questions. But why the question of a regional perspective? Maybe you could feel in my first point that when we say Islamic art as a global concept, in fact, we have different cultural contexts. That's why we also have to think about Islamic art in different cultural contexts. I should say that for Islamic art historians, it's a question that becomes more and more important, not to speak always about Islamic art, but sometimes to speak about Arabic art or Iranian art or Turkish art or Indian art. And of course there is also very important thing in Islamic art, which is Chinese influence. So very quickly to show you what can we call Arabic art, for instance. Of course, Arabic art in Islamic art is art created in Arabic countries. It's not, with this definition, it's not difficult to understand, but it means that the style of the objects, sometimes the techniques, sometimes the images can be very different, because it's not only a same definition of Islam, but it's also, because we are in art, it's also the heritage of some old tradition of local art. So here I chose this capital, marble capital, coming from Algeria, Tlemcen again, from a mosque, and I will not develop, but it's typical of a mix of new tradition, of course, with calligraphy on architecture, and a very typical calligraphy that you only find in North Africa at this time of 14th century. And all this vegetal decoration is a real old tradition of late antiquity in the region. This is also Arabic art, but I should say it's Arabic art from Oriental Mediterranean. It means from this region of the Mamluk time, but that was both in Egypt and in Syria. And you don't see the details of this basin, but the details of the life, it's another example of the life of a prince, show you typical the way of life in Egypt, which is not the way of life of a prince in Iran, or here more in the east part of Islamic world. Here also, you have two typical characteristics of Arabic art. One is the technique, this technique of enameled and gilded glass, so it means painting and gold on the glass. You don't find it in Iran, for example. And of course, the hairdresser and the dress is typical of Egyptian style and not at all of Iranian style. So we just have to imagine that in this Islamic world, in the past, we never had only one culture, one way of life. So Iranian art, when we say Iranian art, you have two types of Iranian art. Because Iranian art means not only art coming from Iran of today, but the Iranian world in Islamic history goes from Afghanistan to Iraq. So it's a very huge territory with a same type of culture, included also Central Asia. Of course, I could develop why do we call it this huge territory Iranian world, but because it was same type of political rules and the same type of culture. But you can see two different styles in this Iranian world. Those three objects here is typical of the east part. Here, this incense burner, which is a feline, and you always, you saw before as a detail this head on the slides. So this is typical of the production of east part of Iranian world during 11th century, so it means in the beginning of Islam, a big city developed in the beginning of Islam in the Iranian world was not Isfahan. Isfahan is a new capital during the 16th century, but it was a city called Herat in Afghanistan, in northwest of Afghanistan, which was an important capital of these new dynasties of the Islamic world. One of the dynasty of this Iranian region were called Ghaznavid, and whose incense burner are symbolic also of the incense road coming from India and going through the east part of this region. Another typical image of this Eastern Iranian culture, it's this type of ceramics with horsemen inside. The capital of this culture was Nishapur. Nishapur is east of Tehran, if we want to imagine it today. And Bamiyan, of course you heard about Bamiyan in Afghanistan, who's also known as a Buddhist region, but you have typical Islamic style coming from Bamiyan, which is typical of this type of decoration. Here we are more